Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cyber criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified these 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Subscribe to all of our shows on the network by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe. We got all kinds of shows, Business Security Weekly, Application Security Weekly, all kinds of stuff there. And we've curated some of our favorite episodes from the past in our episode starter packs. You can find them all at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Join us on June 29th with Tyler Robinson and Bo Bullock to learn how to pivot into the world of crypto security and cryptocurrency. securityweekly.com/webcasts. Get you registered for that. And two of our subject matter experts in blockchain and cryptocurrency will be on that webcast, explaining it all to us. Tyler, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that one's going to be fun. I am super excited to do it with Bo, and honestly, we'll see how much we can actually cover. It's a kind of a Wild West for areas that we can dive into, but no matter where you sit in that space, we'll bring some value around attacks, defense, current states, general knowledge. Like, it's going to be a good time.
And we're going to do a webcast on smoking meat as well, because Josh has got a pellet smoker.
I like oh, geez, she just told me about barbecuehacks.com, and I'm like, oh my God, I can turn my smoker into a pizza oven. This is awesome.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's so what I like to do is, you said steak, right? I think the best steaks are on the smoke. Whatever kind of smoker you have, it doesn't matter. Smoke them for usually most steaks are around 45 minutes, right? Take them up to 115, 120-ish, right? Then take them off and sear them. And what you sear it on is you got a Blackstone, you got a cast iron pan, whatever you have. You want to use the grill to do it, that's fine too. And just give them a quick sear. Put a crust on that. I do lamb the same exact way. I know you love lamb too.
Oh, I love lamb.
I do rack of lamb the same way. I do lamb loin chops. I just got these lamb steaks. They're like lamb leg steaks or something. I did it all the same way. Very simple. Salt, pepper, maybe a little garlic. Smoke them for about 45 minutes. Sear them. Some free advice here on Security Weekly. It's been working really well for me. They come out amazing, dude. Amazing.
Well, so we're moving, and we're still living in the old house, but I'm working every day. Like, I take calls, and then I go put some piece of furniture together or something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like today, was setting up the wireless in the house. You know, we had the Verizon wireless, and that's crap. So I set up. You know, I've got some stuff working now for a full enterprise wireless system at the house. And by the way, let me tell you something. When you go back to doing wiring stuff, after not doing it, you're like, wow, I'm stupid. I have to relearn all the crap I forgot 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I grilled. I smoked chicken yesterday, and I smoked steaks today, and I would bring them home. And my wife Janice is like, "This is awesome! I'm going to fill the freezer with steak, and you're smoking it all summer."
Yes,
honey, you're wrong. She goes, "What am I wrong about?" I'm like, all year.
Yeah, yes. I have the Snuggie for my smoker. If it's below 40 degrees, you can put this thermal cover on it. They make them for Traeger. I'm sure they're pretty universal, and it holds in the heat. It's amazing. You can smoke all year round.
So okay, we got to make this relevant to Security Weekly. So we need to talk about the microprocessors,
fucking firmware
and the
updates,
Wi-Fi.
dude. So one morning, forget what holiday it was, either Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's usually when I'll smoke. Like Thanksgiving, I'll smoke the turkey on the Traeger because it's easier and it's all outside. And then Christmas, I usually smoke something, for dinner. And one of those mornings, I went out and I had got the smoker, turned the smoker on. I have a Traeger, and it's like doing firmware update. There was no option for me to cancel it. Like, I had to sit there and wait for it to update firmware as soon as it connected. I'm like, so wait, that means as it's turning on, it's like a C2 channel back to Traeger to go, wait, is there new firmware? And if there is, halt all user operations. We're updating firmware, baby. I'm like sitting there with like my grill tongs and like the turk. I'm like, what? What do you mean you're updating firmware? Like, what if something bad happens? Then what am I going to do?
What happens if like an attacker is able to leverage that firmware to start a fire or turn it up, burn out all your pellets? Like, seems like this is the attack for IoT in which you maintain persistence and gain access into an executive's home network that has his corporate laptop hooked up at home. Like that's exactly how I would target something.
You could turn the temperature up, but that's not necessarily going to set it on fire. Usually when you see people with pellet smokers, because I'm in like a bunch of the Facebook groups, if you see ones that are on fire or there's just like this plethora of smoke like billowing out, it's just because you didn't clean it enough. Like you have to clean a pellet smoker every single time. You have to vacuum out the firebox, vacuum out all the dust. Yeah, and the chimney. The chimney's oftentimes where like a fire will start. So you just gotta clean. And if there's any grease drippings, because like grease will drip around. Like there's a drip pan in the Traeger, but there's space in between the edge of the grill and the drip pan. So grease drips down in there. That will also start, because there's like little sparks flying when the pellets are burning, and that's how people set their crap on fire. So I don't know if a firmware attack, I mean, unless you could somehow bypass some of the safety mechanisms, but like
no, wait, don't even worry about the Traeger itself or the smoker itself or the grill itself or whatever. Realize the fact is that the smoker is connected to your Wi-Fi in your house.
Yes. The
smoker is connected via an app to your phone.
Correct.
In some form or fashion, I'm going to get into the smoker, okay, whether through Traeger's C2 channel, because I mean, how secure is that? I don't know. It would be amazingly secure. I want Traeger to sue me. But it could be, a pile of crud, okay? And then I'm going to get into
they're probably not focused on cybersecurity, as part of their business model.
They're into smoking, And so they get compromised. And then I'm in every grill across the country. Now, first off, that's a botnet. Okay, that's a Mirai style botnet right off the bat, right? Secondly, if I can then get into the app, I can now see everyone that's using one. I can have control of that app. If I can break out of the sandbox that the app is in, I've got your phone. I mean, and you're like, oh my God, that's like 15 layers of complexity. And
two-factor location, when you're at home, when you're traveling and you're not at home or using your smoker. There's a lot there, man. All of these IoT devices scare me.
They do.
And how many apps do you have on your phone? Paul, like how many apps do you have on your phone?
Like a lot.
Tyler, how many apps do you have on your phone? Like 3?
Which phone?
Yeah, I've wanted to do that too. I wanted to have a separate phone for like all of like the silly apps, like the Traeger, like a Traeger app. Like why is a Traeger app on the same phone as like, my email and even like social media that I want to protect more so than, I think that was the great thing about, was it Silent Circle? That had
the black phone.
The black phone.
The different profiles.
They could create different secure enclaves within your phone, so you could put apps in those enclaves. I think that would be a great. It's like I think they were trying to target I don't know what happened to that company if it's still around, but they were trying to target I think more the enterprise users, right? I think an add-on, now Apple would be hard because of the walled garden, right? Android might be easier to create secure enclaves within your Android phone. There's probably a company that does this kind of stuff.
Nope. As far as I know, no. CyanogenMod, was it? What was the other one? Not CyanogenMod, the other open source phone OS.
Purism. Purism makes a phone.
Started with an L. Lineage.
Yeah. There are some open source phones that I have not looked into.
Lineage had a way to do that. I think they called it Scenes or something. But I don't know if they're even around anymore.
Did Tyler drop?
He always has problems.
I think he had to go.
Silent Circle died because Mike Janke went over to Data Tribe. They're an investment firm. And Dragorn left Blackphone and went over to, I think that was when he went to Aruba. Not the country, the company, just to be clear.
Right, yeah, part of HP now, right.
And I don't even know where he is now. I need to call him and find out. But
that would be interesting to create something for. I mean, Apple would be hard. Apple would have to be the ones to do it.
I think you're right. I think it would have to be Apple. Okay, so everybody on Discord.
I think there should be.
Is there anything?
And I'm just thinking out loud, right? Like, you should be able to classify your apps and be like, this is one class of apps, put them here, and they don't have access to the data that these other apps have, and have some classifications, even just like 3 classifications, like low, medium, high, right? Like my email and social media, in my authenticator app and stuff like that, my LastPass app, they go into high security. Right. Then I've got like medium security, right? Might be some of my home automation stuff, perhaps, because I don't want that to mix with my LastPass, right? And then I've got like everything else. And everything else is like the lowest level of privilege. I should be able to actually, again, I'm thinking out loud, set default rules, almost like firewall rules, like the low, like apps I trust the least go into low, and that means they don't have access to the microphone, the camera, any of that stuff. Any file storage, right? Like you should be able to like set default rules for those apps.
Dimitri on Discord is talking about Samsung Knox. He says that's a secure enclave inside Android. Dimitri, so is that something I can set up multiple enclaves or just one?
Most phones have at least one secure enclave, right? That's where they store your...
Like a work profile or something is typically what most phones have.
Yeah, so I got the work profile going on my phone. I think that's something very similar.
But I mean, I sincerely wish that we could have multiple enclaves.
Yes.
That would be awesome. And does anybody know of a way to do that? Multiple enclaves inside an iPhone or Android? Because I would love to have, like for my daughter, an enclave for all her apps, because I've got all the crappy little pizza make apps.
You almost don't want to give your kids your phone. You're like, well, what stops you from opening Twitter and just posting messages on there? Right.
Or what stops them from ordering stuff off of Amazon at random intervals? Trust me, it's been an interesting. Like I've been like, wait, whoa, and snatched the phone back at a restaurant.
Yes.
Okay. And anybody that says they haven't done that, they're lying.
They're lying because your child has forgotten their device or whatever, and you're at a restaurant and they're being bad, and you're like, all right, just watch YouTube on my phone.
My daughter doesn't have her own device yet, but there are times it's very tempting. I swear to God.
Yeah.
We, as much as I'm a geek, we try to keep screen time very, very minimal. To a certain extent, she watches TV after she gets back from school for a little bit. She gets TV after bath, and she's recently gotten me to put the TV on for her in the morning before we take her to school. But sneaky little. Rittenhouse, yours knows better. She's 9. Yeah, at 9 they shouldn't be buying things off Amazon or whatever. Different user profiles, but that's the thing, Dimitri. I don't want to do different user. I don't want to have to log out and log back in.
Right.
I want to be able to sort of swipe from profile to profile and say, okay, I want to turn on the Traeger app, but I don't want the Traeger app to be sandboxed by itself. I want it not to have. Why does it need the microphone? I'm not going to tell my grill turn the temperature up 300. You can get wild with generic. What is that with Knox? Okay, we're getting some interesting answers
this is lazy web at its finest right now.
Yeah, well, I know, but I'm having fun. I mean, we get to ask our listeners some questions and see what they know.
So I want to just talk about the stuff that I've been looking into recently, because I have like a lot of these questions, right? It started when I was listening to Michael Bazel's podcast. Are you listening to Michael Bazel's podcast?
I don't right now. I have too many podcasts to listen to, honestly, right now.
He's threatening to have me on the show.
Okay.
Because him and I were chatting about firmware stuff, right? What's his podcast? I want to make sure I get the name right. Privacy, Security, and OSINT podcast show.
Okay.
Michael Bazel. It was on 266 episodes. I was listening to episode 264. It was titled Back to Basics Linux 1. It was not basics at all, because he started talking about firmware stuff, right? So like, in Michael's audience, it seemed to me, in the way he was presenting his show, is very much about like privacy aspect of security, and people who really value privacy. So if you really value privacy, you might be looking into running Linux on your laptop, maybe using Purism or System 76, as your platform. Then you got talking about like what firmware do you run. So one of the things I've been learning as I started Eclipsium is that there's firmware from the hardware manufacturers, and there's also open source firmware. That open source firmware in UEFI sense is called core boot, right? Now, it doesn't make it more secure. It just means you can go read the source code if you want. It's just to make that like you're not more secure because you have core boot on there rather than your manufacturer's software that implements UEFI standard. It just means it's open. You can go read the source code if you want. And as much as I've looked at that so far, like good luck. Like you're going to have to do a lot of homework before you get to the point of reading and understanding source code that implements the UEFI standard. It's like 365 or 500 pages if you want to go read the UEFI standard, right? But that's your definitive answer for questions about UEFI. So then,
and by the way, for anybody that thinks that that's like, why do you need anything that long to just explain the standard of booting a machine up?
Oh my God, it's so much going on, dude. So much going on.
There's so many choices and ramifications for every single choice made.
Yes.
That it's actually, I'm honestly surprised they're able to get it in only 500 pages.
Yes. And so, but then you got to start talking about what really scares me right now is Intel ME. Now, I want to knock Intel. Intel's doing a great job providing this functionality and trying to secure it. And they pay attention to security, right? But like anything else, Josh, as you know, software, hardware, it's going to have flaws and hackers are going to be hackers and we're going to find ways around it, right?
Yeah, of course.
But ME basically represents a computer within your computer that allows you to administer your computer. So we did on Enterprise Security Weekly an episode on vPro, right? And one of the things that the vPro suite touts is, if Josh, you work for my company, I can remote into your computer and I can rebuild your operating system remotely. The only way you can do that is to be on hardware and software that is not the same hardware and software that I'm rebuilding on. And that's where they built.
Yes.
So think HP ILO, Dell iDRAC, Intel ME are basically all the same thing, right? They call them BMCs, baseband management controllers. Intel also puts the umbrella AMT, active management technology. There's like an acronym alphabet soup, right, that goes along with all this stuff. But the way I got in this is Michael's talking on his show about like, can you disable Intel ME? Like, because it has vulnerabilities and those vulnerabilities are present in your system. Can you disable it? And then I stumbled across ME Cleaner, which I think doesn't work on later versions of the Intel processor beyond Skylake, because you can't disable this stuff entirely because your system needs some of it to actually boot.
No, you can disable AMT. You cannot disable ME.
Correct.
So what they're saying is
you can disable components of it.
Right.
Not
if you disable
entirely.
AMT, they're saying, oh no, nobody can get at ME if you disable AMT. And I'm like, that's nice. What you've just done is a WAF, and I think we said this earlier. It's a worldwide WAF.
Right.
And it's great, but that still means there's a vulnerability there. So if somebody can drop some shellcode on my machine that then interacts with ME,
right? And then that's my question is, I believe
does a ping pong back and forth.
Yeah, like if you gain root on your Linux system, and now I have the kernel. The kernel, believe, still has ties like can interact with ME in some capacity. I think the same thing on Windows. Like there's communications there.
Yeah,
which I'm still unpacking and trying to research this, right? Because here's the overarching fear is that now in every Intel CPU after a certain date you've got this functionality. It's Intel ME. If you don't update it, you're vulnerable, right? If an attacker gains control of your machine, they can potentially gain access to ME through vulnerabilities and persist on your system like in a gnarly way. Your operating system doesn't matter. In fact, anything you do on your other hardware in your computer doesn't matter because ME lives on like a small microprocessor with a small microkernel that has its own RAM and storage. I'm not sure if the storage is on the same SPI that the UEFI is on, but this is also
it doesn't need much storage.
It's vendor specific. Yeah. Like I have an MSI laptop. I have to go to MSI to get the Intel ME update because they've made customizations to it. So it's manufacturer
and they've not necessarily made customizations to the firmware. They've made customizations to, like you said, where the
hardware
is stored.
Or where the firmware is stored or how it interacts. Yeah, they've made general customization. So like sometimes through Linux in the Linux Firmware Vendor Service, or FWUpd, it can update ME, what they call drivers. They're not really drivers, like I believe it's the firmware. I think driver is the wrong term there, because in Windows they call it the ME driver update. I think it's just a generic term, right? So like some models you can, some models you can't, because again, it's manufacturer specific. Like this just makes me uneasy that if you do run Linux like I do, you how do you know if, unless you're going in specifically looking, and it's kind of hard to look with just Linux utilities if those Linux utilities don't support, like in my case, the MSI version of Intel ME. You can run a laptop that has vulnerabilities you'd never know about. And it's something you can't just go in the BIOS and disable either, right? Because ME is more for like that out-of-band management stuff. If I don't care about that, I can't just go in and disable it. I think it's just an interesting kind of rabbit hole I'm going down.
No, it's not a rabbit hole. Look, I just threw an article in Slack. I'm going to throw it in Discord right now. And I want to talk about it because it's actually kind of important. And it's right in what we're talking about, okay? And what this article is this OT, operational technology companies. Okay, let's be clear on that.
This is the Forescout. This is Forescout's research, right? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this was Forescout.
Okay. And so what happened was, and it just came out.
This is Icefall. Icefall. Yes. That's Forescout did this research.
Right. So they had operational technology companies that have vulnerabilities in their code. Okay, that happens, right? But what they're saying is the vulnerabilities were not because somebody skipped a semicolon or whatever. It's because the culture of coding, the culture of development, the culture of the company building these firmwares, building this code is horrible for security. And some of them have been around some of these vulnerabilities have been around for years. And so I've got to say, this goes right back to the ME discussion. We're talking about, like in terms of computers, multi-computer generations of vulnerabilities. I don't know. Did that come out right? Did that make sense, what I was saying?
Not really.
Okay, so these are vulnerabilities and cultural vulnerabilities that are around for multiple generations in computer years. If you think about computers, like we have a generation of computers every 5-ish years. There's a revolution in something or other, so we have another generation of computers. And, Pentiums came around, and Pentium 4 and Xeons, and, Macs get the M1 chip and all that kind of stuff, right? And OT, yes, I know OT moves slower. PLCs have been around for, oh my God, forever, right? But still, they have generations. They have breakthroughs in how they operate, how they work, what they're made of, et cetera. So for multiple of these generations on both the IT and the OT side, these companies have been building these vulnerabilities into their products, not deliberately, but not really caring. And so
it was something I read the Bleeping Computer article on this. I haven't actually read the actual research, but in the Bleeping Computer article, they say, to your point, Josh, I'm sorry, I have this somewhere. Many vulnerabilities are due to the insecure by design nature of OTs, operational technologies.
And isn't that horrible that OT is just simply regarded as insecure by design?
Right.
Isn't
like
that
many
horrible?
vulnerabilities are due to, but it also says many authentication schemes are broken. That is, if there is an authentication scheme. And if there is an authentication scheme, it's broken. So this is like not even, it relates to firmware security, but this is just software and hardware design has not been designed to provide security. One of the pillars of security being authentication.
Really?
Who is authorized to access this device or access this protocol or this service is thrown out the window. I've seen this with many embedded devices. I'll give you an example.
Authentication, authorization, and accountability? Who would have thought?
I'll give you an example. We bought an HDMI router. So it has 8 HDMI inputs and 8 HDMI outputs.
Is it a switch or a router?
Maybe it's more like a switch, an HDMI switch, but
no, you said it's got 8 inputs and 8 outputs. So no, it's a router. You're right.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You're right.
It's a router.
My bad.
Because I can say input 1 goes to output 345, goes to output 1, so I can program which output maps to which input maps to which output, right?
That's really cool. I want one.
Yeah, like which in the studio, by the way, like the use case is great, like because it means I can take one HDMI feed and then I can program it to go wherever I want it to, right? The way you program that is they give you an interface on the front that's a little LCD screen with some buttons, and you can basically you push input 1 and then I forget how it works, but you can program the inputs and outputs. They also give you an Ethernet port with a Telnet interface on it. Telnet service running on it. There is no
Wait, did you say Telnet?
It's Telnet, and
You said Telnet.
There's no username and there's no password. And you Telnet to the device, and you are in the console, and you can program it, and you can map input 1 to input 3 or whatever you want to. Yes.
And this surprises me not at all, and still makes me cringe.
How do you secure that, you ask? You take a Raspberry Pi and you plug the Ethernet port of your HDMI router into one port in your Raspberry Pi. You get a USB to Ethernet dongle for your Raspberry Pi, and you plug that into your network, and you SSH into your Raspberry Pi, and then you Telnet into your HDMI router. That's how you secure that. At least that was my solution. I'm sure there's lots of other solutions, but the manufacturer doesn't give you the option to set a password. So what do? It's kind of hard to modify you'd have to reverse engineer the firmware and replace it with your own Telnet server that you'd have to compile for whatever processor that thing is running, which I have no idea what it is. I haven't actually got a hold of the firmware and reverse engineered it, but.
Or alternatively, you know what you can do?
Just not connect it.
So it's an RJ45, you said? Mm-hmm. Throw epoxy in there.
Yeah, put some hot glue in that Ethernet port, right? Because there's a web interface for it too, which I don't remember if that even has a username and password on it. I want to say it doesn't. I feel like the web interface was the same way. No authentication. So take about your OT example. That's kind of what the 4Scout team is alluding to, is that there's no security in the design. And I think the HDMI router is a great example of that. They didn't think about security at all. They were like, oh, this is an appliance. People are going to plug it in, and they want to be able to Telnet to it and program it. But that means anyone.
Can I give you an example that's hilarious? So a friend of mine was doing a pen test on a bus system. This is a mass transit bus system. And the buses have cameras in them, right? Mm-hmm. And DVRs. And he had a DVR out of one of the buses. And he was looking at it to try to break into it. He was checking the security of it. And there's an RJ45. And he goes, what's this? And he does a scan, and he comes up with a Telnet server. He's like, oh, my God. So he throws Hydra on it and runs it for 3 weeks. Nothing. He goes, damn it. Josh, what do you think? I'm like, I don't know, man. What word list do you use? He tells me the word list. I'm like, that's what rock you, the this, the that, everything. He's got great word lists.
Great word list. Yep.
Yeah. He forgot to click the switch that said try a blank password. He was in 30 seconds later.
Dude, so many.
This is a DVR.
Dude,
on a bus with security cameras for public safety.
Yes.
And
it's so often this is missed. And it's missed in development cycles. I actually introduced this bug in PPWorks and had to fix it because the testing cycles don't often check for blank usernames and passwords.
Right.
Couple different scenarios there that you have to test, right? You have to check, because there's 2 fields, so you have to check, what if I don't put anything in both fields? What if I leave the password blank and I fill out the username and then reverse it? What if I fill out the password field and I leave the username blank? And then so there's 3 different scenarios, very basic scenarios that you have to test for authentication. And oftentimes, like you said, Josh, your friend missed it because it's so you would have to require both, right? You just kind of assume, happens when you assume that this should be the case.
Okay.
But if you don't test for it, you'd be surprised in the results, right?
I'm going to roll this back a little bit. There's a joke, and I think I've told it here on this show, but I love this joke so much. So the order was that we need you to develop a bar. And so the developers developed a bar. Just roll with it. I promise that's a good one. And the head developer goes, all right, I'm going to go check it out and make sure it works. And he goes in and he says, I'd like a beer. And he gets a beer. He goes, I'd like 3 beers. And he gets 3 beers. He goes, I'd like 9,999 beers. And the bartender goes, I'm sorry, you've hit an error condition. You can order anywhere from 1 to 30 beers.
This reminds me of the joke. Roman works in a bar, holds up 2 fingers and goes, 5 beers, please.
But oh God, that's bad. But that's bad. But he goes, okay, I'd like -1 beers. And the waiter, the bartender goes, I'm sorry, sir, you've hit an error condition. You need to order between 1 to 30 beers. This is great. This is great. He goes, this is fantastic. QA walks in the door, says, I'd like a glass of water. The bar burns down. Okay. I mean, like, this is the problem that we run into, is that developers want to develop what they're told to develop.
Right.
They don't think of all the potentialities, which is why fuzzing works.
Have you ever worked with an Allen and Heath mixer? I'll call them out because it's just.
I'm sorry. Say again.
Allen and Heath.
Yeah, that's
mostly mixers.
Yes. Yeah. My dad had one, I think.
Yeah. Amazing. So we have got some here in the studio. They also have Ethernet on them. Now, the sliders are they're mechanical, but they're controlled by the microcontroller or processor inside of the mixer. So when you hit certain buttons, right, you can have pre-programmed the sliders move on their own. They also have an Ethernet port. They get an IP address. And if you know the port and the IP address of the mixer, without authentication, you can get a Python library from the internet on GitHub, and you can control your mixer. And so
the sliders will move all by themselves.
And it was awesome because I go push the button on my keyboard or whatever, I'd get my laptop over to it and I'd hit enter and run the program. It would connect to the mixer and all the sliders would move. I'm like, but no authentication. But I'm like, all right, you'd have to scan the network to find the mixer. No. Load the the iOS app from Allen and Heath that gives you full control over the mixer. When you first load up this app, it uses either broadcast or multicast to advertise, hey, I'm an Allen and Heath mixer. So when you load up the app, it goes, do you want to connect to this mixer? Because it's on your network. So discovery is just a matter of intercepting broadcast or multicast traffic. I forget which one it is. So you could find that. You can control the mixer. And all of this happens without authentication. It even saves you the trouble of scanning the network to find if there are mixers on it because it's broadcasting itself endlessly on the network.
I have to tell the Gauss on the Discord is swearing that IoT and oddball device programmers and integrators are a gang. And the jump-in process is having a plastic bag tied around your head for 10 minutes.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not surprising. Like, we haven't solved the firmware security. It's one of the reasons why I work where I work today at Eclipsium, because we haven't solved the firmware. I'm going to describe it as firmware, right? But like these devices,
it's a code. It's a word a term that you're using for all the different ways. Yeah,
because there are, like, I don't know how you classify a mixer. It's not really an IoT device. It's not really an enterprise level device. I mean, it depends what kind of enterprise.
IoT. It's IoT.
Would you call it IoT? It's a microprocessor that connects to the network.
I mean, physically, it's large, but an infusion pump at a hospital is large. It's tall. But it's an IoT device. It's IOMT, Internet of Medical Things.
Right.
I mean, the mixer is an IOMT as well, an Internet of Music Things.
Right. Yes.
So, I mean, the real problem here is that, and I know we've ranted about this for now almost an hour, but I love it. Like, the real problem here, and I hope you'll agree with me, is that it's a cultural issue. It is not a capabilities issue. It is not. We are not able to put security in. Although there are some devices, especially some older ones, that is actually true. And you have to put something in front of them. Okay, and we're talking about that on Discord as well. But like, it's not that the capabilities any less. I mean, we can put security in Arduinos and what are those little 0Ws? Are those Raspberry Pi 0Ws? I forget. There are measures.
So there's the Raspberry Pi 1, one of them is a microcontroller based, and it's not the Zero. What is the Pico? Is the Pico?
The Pico.
And, the Pico is a microcontroller based, like, code runs on the chip. I think everything after that, Raspberry Pi 0 and beyond, is an operating system with a kernel. That's where I make. That's where I make the. I was kind of pressing Joe Grant to explain this to people, and I think that he did a much better job of explaining it. But like he also referred to it as like raw hardware. So you got raw hardware where you write the code and it runs on the device. And there's like exceptions, and he went into like, you know, some of the details. So I kind of put those in one class. And then I'm like, then there's devices that have like a kernel and an operating system. Because to me, the kernel is the tipping point there, right? Because you've got a kernel to lean on to interface with all your hardware via device drivers, so you can write code on top of that, which to me is very different.
Okay, so valid, and that's a great distinction, and thank you. It's effectively the difference between that's a microcontroller and a microprocessor.
Right.
And
it gets harder to define firmware, though, because I think there's a class of firmware-based devices that I was thinking about this week as well. That's like, well, firmware is really sometimes your bootloader, along with your kernel,
right,
along with userland and your file systems in one neat little package that we call firmware.
Well, right? I mean,
that's not always the case. Like, firmware is a much looser term. I'm saying one class of what I would call firmware-based systems are including the bootloader, the kernel, userland, and the file system all in one package. And I think some of the distinction there, like these OT devices, for example, right? You do not have a monitor, mouse, and keyboard that the user interacts with the system on.
Right.
That's where I liked embedded systems, because it meant a special purpose-built device that doesn't have a monitor, mouse, and keyboard that is firmware-based, is like one classification that I would use.
Okay. So Gauss, I didn't know what an Amiga accelerator was. I mean, so he's talking about he has an Amiga accelerator that uses a Pi. I've never even heard of that before. So it basically makes an Amiga actually modern style fast. That's really
crazy.
Cool.
That's crazy.
I did not know about that. That's neat. I'll have to look them up. Thank you.
But now I want to talk about, because Cisco had some vulnerabilities they fixed, Josh, and they're in appliances. I think a lot of these appliances are also, many of them are Linux firmware based. Cisco.
Yeah.
So hey, Cisco says.
Remember, I had a Cisco 2501. If you remember that, something that old.
Yes.
And you pop it open, and you're like, "This is a Pentium."
Yes.
Like, this is just a motherboard with a Pentium chip on it and running some kind of embedded code. What's the big deal?
Right. Their iOS is largely BSD based. I mean, I don't know what it is today, but like, back in the day, there was a lot of code from BSD in Cisco iOS, if I remember correctly.
So it's BSD based. It's an embedded controller, but in the old days, it was running a complete motherboard and chip and thing like that.
Right, but they're talking about, so let's put their routers and switches aside for a moment. Cisco's secure email and web manager and the email security appliance in both the virtual and hardware appliances. So they make a virtual and a hardware appliance. So they say some of the earlier versions of both products have reached end of life, so the manufacturer won't release fixes and instead told customers to migrate to a newer version. Probably because they want to pay more money to get the newer version, because they're not giving you that shit for free. Most likely, is my guess. I'm not knocking Cisco, because they're not the only people that make appliances. So kind of want to talk about, like, do you appliance or not appliance? So I've got this appliance that conceivably saves me some time and effort and work, because they're packaging up the bootloader, the kernel, the operating system, user
it's
file
a Cisco.
systems.
It doesn't save you any time.
Right? And they're providing software on it that comes in either virtual or a hardware-based thing that I just drop into my network and I get the interface. And I don't have to manage and maintain down to the operating system or maybe even firmware level, right? All of that stuff. I get to apply updates to it. I don't have to manage a Linux or Windows system to run this software. That's always been touted since I've learned about these systems as a benefit. However, there's a downside to that. When they have vulnerabilities, if they're not going to fix them, I don't have control over that hardware and software, right? I rely on the manufacturer to give me updates to it. If they're not going to apply an update, I'm screwed. I got to buy a new appliance. I think it's I think it's unfair. Like, there's a right to repair aspect to this, Josh. Like, what's a reasonable thing to assume? Like how long it's going to be supported? Do I know that when I buy it, when they're going to end of life it? I don't necessarily know that when I buy it.
Well, no, okay, so Cisco and the bigger companies have policies about how long it takes for them to end of life things. So you actually can find that out. I'm going to push back a little on that.
Sure.
I am going to point out that it's software as well. So not just appliances and firmware, but let's look at two of the most popular pen test distros, and that's Kali and Pentoo. Okay, and Kali is, has been around for how long now? And it's run by the offensive security team, and they're great and they're wonderful. And I love them dearly. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But they do not do security updates on the fastest basis because they're more concerned with making sure the tools run right and teaching the classes and things like that. And they tell you explicitly, don't run Kali in production, or don't leave Kali in production.
But with Kali, I can customize it, right? It's all open source. When I get Kali, I have all the means.
No, but my point is not so much about the customization.
Right, but if there's an outdated PHP,
you can do
Kali,
it. You can fix it.
I can go fix that, right? I have an appliance from, I don't want to pick on Cisco necessarily, right? But from any manufacturer, I've got an appliance, I'm kind of at their mercy because I don't have access to go update that. I also don't have great visibility. I'm kind of relying on them to go, there's Intel ME on the chip that I delivered your appliance on and it needs to be updated. Right? I don't really know that in my own.
And we can't disable it, and so your router can be screwed at any point, and it's nothing you can do about it.
And it's not so much the routers from Cisco, right? It's their appliances. Like I remember their VPN concentrators were appliances, which was convenient for me at the time, where I could just go buy their Cisco. I forget what was it called at the time. There was like an appliance you could buy from Cisco that implemented a VPN. I did it when I worked at university. It was great. I didn't have to do anything with the OS, configure all that stuff, put it together. They dropped off an appliance. You read their documentation, and you can configure it. The problem is, at some point, it's going to be end of life, and you're going to have to refresh it.
Was that the ASA?
I think no, it might have been. Might have been called an ASA VPN. I don't remember. Someone's yelling it out. It
was the 515 before, and then it turned into ASA's 5505 and that kind of stuff. And I'm showing my age, and I think I still have a 5505 sitting in a bag somewhere. Mm-hmm. The PICs. But these But see, I ran their VPN platform. It wasn't inside the firewall. It was a completely separate appliance. Oh, okay.
I racked it, and it did nothing but VPN. I don't remember what it was called.
Inferno, Plan 9. We're getting some other answers from...
probably a company they bought that they implemented.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the PICs was based on... They bought the firewall that they've been selling for how many decades now? Which is not a bad thing. I mean, that's fine. That was good. But, no, I mean, and my point about Kali was not to rag on Kali. It was just to point out that if you download Pentoo, you may have to compile some of it, although I think Zero has built binaries of it.
Sure.
But it is totally viable to run in production because it's just a production version of Gentoo with a Pentoo overlay. Mm-hmm. So it has all of the security updates of the entire upstream of the massive Gentoo infrastructure.
Right.
And all the developers and such. And it's perfectly fine to run as a production machine. Okay. And there's the difference. You have a support facility for Gentoo, Pentoo, which you do not have for Kali. Okay. And so what you want is when you deal with companies that are selling you appliances, that are selling you microprocessors, embedded devices, whatever, you want to make sure you've got some company that's going to have a support infrastructure to build those updates, that's going to have an infrastructure to promulgate and push out and distribute those updates, and an infrastructure and a vested interest in actually making sure you're secure, which is why I tell people on a personal level.
Support's an overloaded term. Like, what does support mean? I'm going to support you and add features. Does support mean I'm going to fix it if you have a problem and give you someone to call? Does support mean I'm going to maintain security fixes from now to the end of time? Like, those are all different things. Like, features, fixes, security fixes, and answering questions all get lumped into this thing we call support. But it's a very complex issue, both from the user side and from the company side that's providing this hardware and or software together, right? Support is hard. That's why I guess my question with appliances is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth me to get this appliance to save me in the short term, but could potentially hurt me in the long term when I know I'm going to have to replace it.
So here's the deal. If you can get the appliance with an SBOM, so you can keep track of the components, if you can get the appliance with a company that you know will update the firmware on a regular basis, the microcode firmware, whatever, you know what I mean? And so it will work. It's a company that will work to keep it updated. And one of the reasons that I like SBOMs is because it pushes the company. You're like, wait, you're running what version of that module? Because I'm sorry, where's my update?
But if it's in firmware, is it an F-bomb?
Nicely done, sir. Nicely done.
And if you have multiple firmware bill of materials, does that mean you're dropping F-bombs all the time?
Oh my God.
I think
is anybody in the studio that can smack him?
This is a term we need to keep forward just so I can make these cheesy jokes.
Dear Lord God Almighty. But I mean, but here's the point. If you don't have a company that you're partnered with to get you these appliances, that's no good. It's a problem. Now,
hopefully, to your point,
Adrian, that's not correct. It's built on Debian, so it gets updates, but they don't push the updates through until they check that it works with the tools.
Right.
That takes them longer. So I apologize, Adrian, but as far as I know, that's not correct. But he's saying that Kali is built on Debian, so it gets updates just as fast as any other Debian distro uses.
No, but that's a whole different rabbit hole. But with the Cisco thing, hopefully as a customer, right, maybe you did work through a VAR to get your appliances. And in either case, you should get some warning that product's going to be end of life so you can plan, right? And so you should adjust your budgets accordingly and plan to update these devices. That's where I think the difference is with OT, right? We started this whole thing about Four Scouts research into OT. I guess it's not different. In OT, you've got to know, okay, I'm going to keep this product running for 20 years.
Or more. How many?
So what are you going to do about it? I'd go to the manufacturer and be like, you're not going to end the life this thing after 15 because I plan on running it for much longer. So all of this conversation should happen up front in the procurement process, Josh. So
let me. A good friend of mine told me a story, and I won't name him for fear that it's not right to, but he'll know it if he hears this. So he was telling me about a transformer that's on a border, and the transformer is one of those big. It's not like one of the garbage can looking ones on your telephone pole near your house.
Yeah.
It's the ones that the size of a building type of thing.
Yeah, okay? It has like fences and gates around it and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And it's a sealed unit that is designed to not be touched, is not user upgradable, not user serviceable, not user stay the hell away from it type of thing. Okay. And it has a main board floating in it because it's floating in the oil for cooling. It doesn't need a fan. It doesn't, no moving parts. And it is not due to be upgraded, touched, patched, replaced, or anything for a while. I'll get to that in a minute. Guess what operating system it's running?
Windows XP.
Close.
Windows 98.
No.
Windows NT. Windows NT.
Yes. Which version?
4.0. Windows NT for workgroups.
3.51.
Oh, wow.
NT 351. Guess when it's due to be replaced or rebooted, whatever.
5 years from now.
Oh, 2069.
How does that? I mean, that's kind of impressive. First of all, you got a board floating in oil running Windows NT 351. Like, you're pretty sure of your software at that point. That's crazy.
I mean, 351 was, I remember going, this is really nice.
Oh, yeah. In 1999.
Yeah, details. Yeah, you know. I mean, it's Gmark. Gmark still has a Windows XP laptop. He's like, I have it exactly the way I want it. Leave it the fuck alone. You know, he knows every single function key on that thing. Like, you could blindfold him, tie one hand behind his back, and he'd still make this thing do somersaults. Okay? And there's a value to that. I get it. I get why
didn't we talk with Gmark about this when we had him on the show?
We did. We talked about his XP laptop, I think.
I don't remember that, but okay.
Yes, Gauss is right. 351 was the USS Yorktown, caused it go dead in the water off the coast of Virginia. I think you're correct. Oh my God, that takes me back. Wow. Okay.
Here I see. I'm thinking I'm ancient running Ubuntu 20.04. And the reason I want to wait for the .1 of 22.04. However, 22.04 supports secure boot, which is interesting. Because like right now, most Linux distributions and installations require that you disable secure boot. But I believe Canonical, I think in cooperation with Microsoft, what I was reading, actually pulled all the right certificates. And in Linux, you implement shim to do that verification to get secure boot to work. And they did that in 2204, which is
so we've got somebody who's staring at us running Fedora Rawhide. Which one is Rawhide? I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Alan Nealon, my friend. Which one is Fedora Rawhide? Give me something to compare it to. I don't remember the version numbers. Version names.
I haven't run Fedora in a long time. I think I tried it once in like the 90s, maybe, or early 2000s.
It's the development version? So is it it's the bleeding edge? Is that what it is? We got both kind of fedoras, country and Western. Oh, dear God.
Oh.
Dad jokes are running rampant. This is horrible. Why are we the dad joke show of doom? Anyway, okay, so Fedora 37, yeah, it's the bleeding edge. So Alan, how's running Fedora bleeding edge going for you? But, I mean, in all honesty, so this is a really interesting point. There are appliances of all shapes and sizes. I know companies that put appliances in, like big boxes, 2U boxes, full depth, the whole 9 yards, right?
Sure.
And do you know what they were running?
Old versions of Linux is typically what we find in a lot of these
All they were
devices.
doing was running a call home box. That's it. But if you put in an impressive appliance that's painted in a pretty color,
right,
people will buy it and put it in their data center.
Yeah, you know what my like jump boxes are and call home kind of stuff, Josh? Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, that's all you need.
I mean, it's a Linux box that'll run SSH. Small footprint, low power. You get two of them because they're cheap. I mean, you can't find them now, but that's besides the point. You get two of them. Beside the point. You put one on one power grid, one on another. Like, put them as on separate as you can make them in your facility, right? Like here we have, like, there's a unit downstairs and there's a unit upstairs. And there's separate UPSs, and I mean the power to the building is the power to the building, right? But at least they're separate as I could make them here. And those are your jump boxes. Like
they work. What's the problem?
Right.
People have been using Raspberry Pis for VPN endpoints, and jump boxes for since they came out.
Yep.
I think I made a Raspberry Pi 1 into a jump box at one point. And I
have one running WireGuard.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, it runs WireGuard.
I wasn't aware it could do that.
It gives you VPN. Yeah. Someday I'll tell the story about how I maintain PCI compliance with WireGuard.
Oh, you have to tell that story sometime. But in all seriousness,
also, I mean, this ties into the QNAP NAS devices, RCE exploits on them. Basically, they're running old versions of PHP.
No.
Vulnerable to attacks that would exploit a 3-year-old critical PHP vulnerability, allowing remote code execution. PHP versions 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3 in specific versions, if exploited vulnerability allows attackers to gain remote code execution. So I'm not sure if this was like a new vulnerability that affects versions of PHP up to 3 years old, or if this was in fact a 3-year-old vulnerability. They're in either case, right? They're running an old version of PHP.
Okay, so QNAP is a reputable storage vendor,
right? I mean, and they fixed it.
I mean, like,
but
reputable.
But again, you have to compel people to update firmware on their devices. And updating firmware is still like not what the cool kids do. I don't want to. Maybe it's not. It's like not. This is my world now. Like, how do I mean, it has been my world. Like, how do you compel people to update firmware outside of our own echo chamber, even within our own echo chamber? Like, you've got to update firmware. Like, there's no.
Okay, so how do you do it? Because let's be honest.
There's no Microsoft Windows update for your QNAS device.
For your doorbell. for your 3 storage things for your Plex server.
Unless they do it for you. But go back to our grills. My grill makes me do it. Why does my now my grill is my grill. We discussed some attack vectors there, but my QNAP NAS device has my data on it. So like, why is there forward thinking when I go to my pellet smoker to go, when I turn it on, it's going to check for firmware updates. And if there's a firmware update, I'm going to apply it. My QNAP device is just running, and it is not automatically updating firmware. Is that like an operational thing? Because like my smoker is not something that's running like all the time, right? Like when I need to use my pellet smoker, I plug it in and I turn it on, and then it does the firmware update before I start interacting with it and using it. So actually, that's not a bad strategy. The problem with my QNAP device is I'm going to power it on, I'm going to plug it into a UPS, and that puppy's going to be running on my network 24/7 all the time. I'm not turning it off before I go to bed. It's going to be running. But still, why can't it apply firmware updates without user...
Because QNAP isn't making any money when they're building firmware updates for their devices.
In fact, they'd lose money because if it loses power while it's doing a firmware update and the device becomes bricked, QNAP has to do service on that or send me a new one.
That's literally the problem.
Yep.
We have a culture where we are all about every dollar that comes in. Mm-hmm. And so QNAP, we'll beat on QNAP for a little bit. And I'm not saying they're a bad company. We're going to beat on them for this problem. If they build a firmware update, because they look at their stuff and they go, wow, we have a problem. There's a vulnerability for this chunk of code that we use, right? Like, okay, well, we can build a patch. So that's 2 developers for 3 weeks, and that's a cost. There's just the fact that they have a review process to find that vulnerability, that's a cost. Mm-hmm. Then there's the developers, that's a cost. 2 developers, 3 weeks, whatever it is, you know what I mean? And then there's the, how do we push it out to every QNAP? Does every QNAP call home? Does every QNAP call home? I don't even know.
I know Ring. You mentioned doorbells. Ring doorbells do call home and update firmware for you.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
That's not the norm. That's where I think perhaps we can benefit from regulation. Perhaps we can benefit from a rating system. So
wait. So you've heard it here first. Mr. Paul Asadorian is in favor of regulating your IoT devices.
Regulation and laws that make sense. Okay, you and I had the conversation earlier today, Josh, about
sensible IoT control.
Laws and regulations that don't make any sense. This one would make sense to me, and maybe it's also coupled with a rating system. There's been multiple people that have attempted to implement some kind of rating system or UL based kind of standard. Like if I'm looking to Drobo, I'm not a fan of because I had 2 catastrophic Drobo failures. And It's not 3 strikes you're out. Like after that, I was done with Drobo. I mean, a lot of people have good experience with Drobo. I didn't. So like now, okay, I'm looking for a new network attack storage. I want the one with the rating that says firmware updates happen automatically, right? But more so, I want the world when they make this decision to understand this rating system and have it be important to them. And that's a difficult ask because you're going to go with what's cheapest, maybe, perhaps. And what's cheapest isn't going to have that.
What's cheapest is, Allison Nixon used to have a wall of DVRs, like a wall of DVRs.
Right.
And these were all DVRs that had been at commercial sites, stores and malls and airports and all sorts of crap, right? And she had a thing that would power cycle them every 5 or 10 minutes. I forget what it was. They would be owned before the next power cycle happened.
Yeah, she did that here live on the show. She had a DVR that was getting owned, yeah.
And so the point is those were bought because, I bought one of them, years ago before I knew about this. It was $200 and I got a DVR and 8 cameras along with it. It was awesome, okay? Man, that's not cool. So what would happen if that was a legally regulated system where there had to be firmware updates and I had to have a rating for it and Underwriters Laboratory style certification.
The problem is you're not going to get firmware updates forever. At some point, those are going to stop because they're going to stop supporting the device. And now you have to swap that device out. How much do we want to make?
Orphanware, abandonware.
Yeah, how much do we want to make people do that? That's an interesting problem.
Dude, okay. So so by the way, when we were talking about UEFI and Secure Boot and such, and how it's a 500-page book and all the ramifications of it, we've just gone through some of the ramifications for appliances in this past Christmas, an hour or so, and we haven't even hit all of them. Okay, but what we've done is we've talked about why it's important to understand at least what's going on with the firmware, and I use firmware broadly again, on your devices, on your appliances, on your embedded systems, on all of your stuff. I mean, on a personal level, just as a piece of advice for anybody watching the show, I always recommend buying name brand stuff like a Ring doorbell or a Nest thermostat or whatever. And the reason is not that it's better. I don't say anything is better or worse, but the reason is that you're more likely to have security updates because their name is on it.
It's interesting. It's an interesting aspect if you bring in open source to the conversation, Josh, in that I was thinking, if I buy a DVR, I use a company called Reolink, right? It's basically China, right? But it doesn't connect back to the cloud. The DVR sits on my network, right? And I connect to it. But I think there might be an option to connect to the cloud. In any case, I know they're going to support firmware updates for a certain period of time. What if there was a program where someone could opt in and take over that support? The problem is their software could be largely proprietary, and they're not going to do that. But I think that's the case for open source, where I want to buy the thing that uses open source software. So if the company chooses to not update it, it's open source. Therefore, the open source community can continue to apply updates. Security researchers can report bugs like they have in open source software. Those can get fixed, and I can apply the update. So I guess a notion could be extending the support to open source. The trick of that is the software at some point has to be open sourced.
So I'm going to go back
open source version. Core Boot is the open source version of the UEFI. Again, not any more secure. However, if I've got a device running Core Boot and there's an open source team keeping up with updates to that, I have to worry less that manufacturer MSI, Dell, HP is going to go, I don't provide firmware updates for that laptop any longer, right? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm running Core Boot, and Core Boot's giving me the updates. So if there's a security problem, I can update my firmware. There's just one type of firmware in one type of scenario. Kind of interesting, on the plus side of open source.
So I love open source greatly, but Relevant XKCD is the one where there's this towering software stack and it's off balance, but it's being held up by one little tiny piece. And the notation for that one is, small open source project where one guy who does this in his spare time is maintaining it, and he just got laid off, or something like that. And that's the real truth. Let's be honest. It is. No comment.
I guess it's the week of embedded device news. Hacking into the worldwide jacuzzi smart tub network. Did you see? So devices that are now considered IoT also includes your jacuzzi, because I guess you need an app on your phone that you can change the settings on your jacuzzi, and that's what these devices do, and it's called Smart Tub, which I think is hilarious to think about. The attacks were basically web application attacks, and it turned out to be a single page application using React. And what I thought was interesting was the person that wrote this article went to go log in. I forget where he found the URL because he didn't want to use the app, so he went and used a browser and tried to log in. Yeah, so he went to the smarthub.io site to see what was there. There was an Auth0. So Auth0 was doing the login stuff, which he said Auth0 was great in this scenario. And the vulnerabilities that he found were not related to Auth0. And Auth0 actually tried to help him get in touch with SmartTub, which is a really strange phrase to say, to report these vulnerabilities. The disclosure is a hot mess. If you read the end of this article, disclosure was a hot mess. I think they fixed one out of the two, maybe, but it's hard. The disclosure was such a hot mess, I couldn't even really determine from a quick read exactly what was fixed and what wasn't, because he kind of left it open-ended at the end and If anyone at SmartTub wants to continue the conversation, I'd love to help you make things more secure. So whoever wrote this article and is responsible for the research is great.
So this is another one like the grill. What are they going to do? Put more bubbles in there? Like big friggin' deal. Well, that's okay. So
changing the temperature. Change the temperature. It sounds like a Bond movie. Wasn't there a Bond movie who was trapped in a steam thing? Was that? Yeah. Was that? Well, I mean, there's also the the Finnish National Sauna Challenge or something, and there's people who skin deglove because they sit in the sauna for way too bloody long. But really, I mean, think about this. Even if they don't do anything harmful to you, they can run your hot tub 24 hours a day for 6 months while it's at your vacation home or whatever, and or you're not home, or they run it only 4 hours a night in the middle of the night when you don't notice. They can amp your electricity bill by a hell of a lot and hurt you economically, right? So he goes to log in, it's denied. But he sees like this admin screen flash up, and he actually took a screenshot movie because it flashed up so quickly. He was like, wait, that was the admin interface. And then he started picking apart the app. Like, it turns out like he just used Fiddler to modify the HTTP responses accordingly, and it led him into the admin panel. And then he did something similar to get into like the other admin panel and basically dump all the user's data. The disclosure timeline starts in December 3rd of 2021 and goes all the way to June 20th when he republishes the report. Yeah, so multiple contact attempts, 3 different Jacuzzi Smart Tub email addresses, and Twitter. Dialogue was not established till Auth0 stepped in. So Auth0 went above and beyond. They didn't have to fix it. This was one of their customers, right? But they didn't have to do anything to help the situation. So then communication drops off.
Auth0 is owned by Okta. Okta and Auth0 actually do really, really good work.
Yeah,
I got to give them credit.
They were being responsible here. So without any formal conclusion or acknowledgement, they have addressed all of the reported issues. Okay, so they did actually address the issues. Just the communication was very poor, which to me that's an easy thing to fix, right? Like, are you going to fix the issues? Like, just communicate. Like, is that hard? Is that hard? Is that really that's hard?
Let's be clear. How many companies? Okay, at what level does a company get a dedicated cybersecurity person? Not an IT person, a dedicated cybersecurity person, especially a company that makes hot tubs. Okay?
I mean, it's over 100 or a couple hundred. I mean, it depends on your industry, right? I feel like...
Hot tubs.
You got to be a pretty big hot tub company to get a dedicated security person, right? At 100 people, you probably don't have a...
So they're getting this email going, you've got a vulnerability in your app. And they're like, the IT manager's like, I'm rebuilding 5 laptops today. I don't have time to deal with this crap.
Yeah,
right?
I'm managing access to shares and doing all the password resets. Yeah,
we're
probably developing developing on the product as well to justify their salary. Sub 100 people, your IT person also works for your customers.
Yeah. So honestly, I can understand the loss of or never started communications, because I can see them going, well, we sent an email to the abuse, and that goes into a filed subfolder of somebody's email system, an Outlook, and gets read once every 6 years or something whenever the auditors come around. Okay, and by the way, who audits a hot tub company? Like, honestly, maybe auditors never come around. I don't know. Yes, it's a health and safety issue. But the hot tubbers don't give a crap. They're just trying to sell hot tubs.
The hot tubbers.
The people who make hot tubs. I don't know what to call them. The hot tub manufacturers.
The hot tub time machine.
But okay, so this actually leads right into another article that I threw up in Slack just a minute ago.
Yeah.
Gartner has their 8 cybersecurity predictions for the next 4 years. Did you see that one?
No.
Threw it up in Slack. I'll throw it up. Just came out at about 1 o'clock today. 1 o'clock Pacific, so 2, 3, 4, 4 o'clock today. And you know what? Let me throw it into Discord as well, and we'll try to make sure it gets into the show notes. But we're supposed to be doing news, so I'm grabbing news stories I thought were interesting. And so
number 3 is interesting. 60% of organizations will embrace zero trust as a starting point for security by 2025.
More than half will fail to realize the benefits. So 30% of organizations will try zero trust and fail. Like, this is interesting. So zero trust is going to be what they're saying is zero trust is tough. And they're right. Zero trust is tough. Okay. I agree with them entirely.
When you look at your cloud or application stack, right? Zero trust is hard. Also, if taking zero trust as a concept, you can't have zero trust without firmware security. This is the other things in my day job that I'm thinking about as well. Like, how can you implement that if you don't trust your systems down to the firmware level? You have to trust that foundation first, and then that moves into the operating system and applications as well. I mean,
so I'm going to jump.
It makes it really
go
hard.
To number 6.
By 2025, threat actors will have weaponized operational technology environments successfully to cause human casualties. Well, that's interesting.
That is a Gartner prediction.
With IoT becoming more prevalent in major cities, unfortunately, these devices also open themselves up to potential cyber, just the firmware problem. We're calling it the firmware problem, right?
It's more than firmware.
It's embedded systems, IoT systems.
Yeah. It's a convenient label. It's just it's a label. Leave it at that. But they're predicting that by 2025,
take advantage of connected devices. Connected devices, I think, is a better way to describe it.
As he raises his wine.
Dude, Larry and I were writing the book in 2006 on WT54G routers. We knew firmware security was a hot mess, but then we'd lifted up the covers and we were like, put the covers back down. And then we're like, all right, we should talk about firmware security. And we did that for a while. And we kind of gave up on it.
And then nobody cared.
And we cover it on the show all the time. But the reason I work for a firmware security company is because I'm like, all right, we've made very little progress on what Gartner's calling their number 6, right, in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll love all firmware-based embedded devices. Connected devices, I think, is a great way of putting it. That's a great overarching term to talk about this problem.
The connected threat?
It's the threat against...
The embedded threat. The embedded threat. That's even better.
It is... Yeah, it's hard to put a single label on all of the different use cases.
Anybody got a good name for it in Discord?
I mean, we talked about everything from AV gear to OT devices to the firmware inside your laptops and PCs and servers.
I know. Here we are. Oh, wow. So I don't know if I can name you, but on our Discord, we've got somebody that's got almost 100,000 users flowing through their network. They're an MSP. Mm-hmm. They need a dedicated security person. They know we need one. I know we need one, but yet we do not have one. Here we are. Wow.
But to me, that is not necessarily a threat. It's more relates to risk than a threat. Not having the appropriate resources for security.
Yeah.
That is where are the predictions on that?
We don't charge for it is the problem. We don't look because in MSP world, it's all about price. Mm-hmm. So, your antivirus costs 3 cents more than the other one? I'm going with the other one, man. I don't care. All right. It's and the good MSPs, and I'll speak on MSP world because I know this for a minute, mm-hmm. but the good MSPs do it on value. They're like, no, we protect you. We make your business run. And then the bad customers go, well, you're 5 cents more. Screw you. Yeah, but we're going to keep you up 30% more of the time, up and running. And it's a horrible quandary. The people are not willing to pay for anything that will actually give them the value because they can't see the value. It's like policing. Sir Robert Peel, the father of modern policing, said that the best evidence of good policing is no crime when it's quiet. But if you have that, then they say, well, we don't need cops. It's sort of like when you're on medication and go, well, I feel fine. I'm going to go off the medication. Wait a minute. So
Speaking
it's
antivirus software. Our friends at Minerva Labs are quoted in this article. They say, since March of 2022, we've seen a gradual uptick in Adobe Acrobat Reader processes attempting to query which security product DLLs are loaded into it by acquiring a handle of that DLL. This article is titled, Adobe Acrobat may block antivirus tools from monitoring PDF files.
What?
I'm not sure the motive.
Can you throw
here.
that in Slack and Discord? Because I can't see the news stories in PPWorks.
Yeah, sorry. PPWorks had some issues today.
It's okay. It happens.
Yeah, so that's that article. This is fascinating. So Adobe says we're aware of reports that some DLLs from security tools are incompatible with Adobe Acrobat's usage of CEF. CEF in this case is the Chromium Embedded Framework DLL used by a wide variety of programs. We can assume that the blacklisted DLLs are designed to be unloaded. Oh, no, wait. Sorry, that was the wrong quote. A Chromium-based engine restricted to sandbox design may cause stability issues. So there's like a lot of back and forth here, but I'm like, why is Acrobat preventing antivirus programs from seeing what's inside of a PDF?
Yeah, let's take a look at this. This is terrifying because what it's saying is it's taking away the control. If I am an enterprise administrator and I say I want antivirus, anti-malware, you get the idea, to run on all the systems under my control, I'm doing this because I want to protect them and because I want a consistency of experience, right? So that if I run it across everybody and something hits, somebody clicked the link on computer 15 and it comes up and boom, anti-malware catches it, CrowdStrike, whatever, catches it. I want any other computer that sees that malware to catch it as well. If we're saying that PDFs are not going to be able to be scanned, we lose the consistency of experience. We lose the universal security. I have to worry about individual applications.
So Adobe's saying it may cause stability issues, and then Minerva says that Adobe chose a solution that solves compatibility problems but introduces a real attack risk by preventing security software from protecting the system. So like what you're saying, but Adobe's thing is it's causing stability issues, therefore we've implemented the system that doesn't let security solutions interact with these PDFs. But that causes a security problem, but fixes some of the stability issues with Adobe Reader.
So I know that there's an absolute fix for this. I can tell you right now what the fix is for this.
You use a native utility or some third-party utility instead of Adobe Acrobat Reader.
Yeah, exactly. I use Foxit personally because I think it's really, really better than Adobe. It works wonderfully, and it's very simple, and the reader is of the wonderful price of free.
But then we have to say no, Josh, right? Then if you have 100,000 users, you got to keep Adobe Acrobat Reader off their systems. Yeah. Which is not technically totally possible.
No, Foxit is available
and
in
push
enterprise.
Out, and you gotta push out and support something else, which is probably fine, right? I mean, you're gonna push out and support something, right? Just don't have it be Adobe Acrobat Reader, for sure.
Wrong type.
I mean, how many times Acrobat is a horribly insecure product, and you probably shouldn't have it on your systems.
And PDFs have never been the vector for infection of anything. I mean, never.
I mean, natively, Linux and Mac have like native, like in Mac it's preview. Yep. Linux, it's something else. I forget. It depends on your distribution.
A native PDF reader?
Yeah, and it depends on your distribution, right? So if I open up a PDF, it opens up in Document Viewer on Ubuntu.
Okay.
Again, other Linux distributions might package something different.
Yeah, I'm actually planning. Speaking of that, really quickly, I bought another hard drive for this Framework laptop. I'm gonna try.
So I ordered a Framework laptop.
Oh, good.
Did I tell you that?
No, you didn't tell us that you ordered it.
It's coming in August. It's the new Intel 1280p something processor, i7.
Nice.
It's like
max
the
out
latest
the RAM?
one. 32 gigs of RAM.
That's not maxed out.
No, 64 is maxed out. I was worried about battery life going with more RAM.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. It's only about 2 to 4
Even at
hours.
32, it gets dicey. But again, I mean, this goes
one
back
of the reasons
to...
I want to try Ubuntu and Fedora, because they have some really good battery utilities that'll help me stretch it out significantly.
So Framework,
is a battery
have we talked about Framework on the show?
I mean, we've mentioned it because Adrian bought one and I bought one.
Frame.work. Like it's a, how would you describe it? Like a modular DIY.
It's a modular, self-repairable laptop, as in you can
take it all apart. Like they show the video right on their homepage. Like you can take all of the components out, put them all back in, and you can replace the screen. You can replace the main board, motherboard, all of the components. And there's 4 slots that have these little modular. Is it USB-C that makes it modular? Like they have
USB-C. If you pull one of the things, it's USB-C. Actually, hang on.
Yeah, there's four slots, swappable, so and then you can choose, but like whether you want HDMI, DisplayPort, USB-C, storage. What are some of the other options? USB-A, a regular USB port, and it's interchangeable. The firmware is also open source. I'm looking into some of that. I know at least when I was looking at the EC firmware, I believe their EC firmware is open sourced, which is neat. I think I lost your audio, Josh. Can you hear me? I lost your audio. I think you muted.
Yes, I can hear you. I was muted. Sorry. Here, switch back to me. I'll show you. I actually just popped the HDMI port out of my laptop. And you literally, it's just a USB-C attachment. And so I have an HDMI port that I can pull out and replace with a USB-C, USB-A, 128 gig hard drive, any of those things. It's really, really nice. They're hot swappable. I will drop this back in and it won't care. It's just USB, unplug and plug.
It's a cool little laptop, man. I'm excited. I don't know how we got on that topic, but
it's USB-C powered. So as long as you have one, you have to have one USB-C port in it, so you can power it. But it means I can power it off of a battery bank, and it runs off a battery bank quite nicely, by the way. It says it's a low power charger, but it's fine. I've actually plugged 2 power banks into it, and then it doesn't claim it's a low power charger anymore.
Oh, that's hilarious! It'll actually do that.
Yeah. Yep.
But what I like is it's highly serviceable. That's what I got away from the Apple platform. Like this laptop, you can replace everything. I mean, you can replace the main board, right? If you want to upgrade, you can drop in a new motherboard with a processor and all that stuff.
They're opening up a shop on their website where you will actually be able to buy a motherboard, a new bezel for your screen, a higher resolution screen, all the different ports. Basically, it's a shell with anything you want inside of it. And
this is the way computing should be with your laptop, man. That's why I ordered it. I'm like, you know what? This is the way it should be. I should be able to swap anything out of my laptop easily. And
I bought mine 6 months ago, almost maybe 8 months ago, whatever. I use it constantly. It's great. The one thing I have that I'm not fond of is two things: fan noise and battery life. The fan noise, like right now, the fan is very high. I don't think you can hear it, but it is very high. And it does that when it starts to get warm, and it is warm down here. I don't have air conditioning on running right now in here. But it'll get warm because I've got 64 gigs of RAM in this thing. And so it's always sort of screaming. But it's not bad. It's just sort of annoying. And the battery life with 64 gigs is 2 to 4 hours. That's why I want to switch to Ubuntu and Fedora. I'm going to try both of them because of both of those.
Adrian's running, is it Fedora?
I think it's Fedora. I think it's Fedora. Hey, Adrian's on Discord. Adrian, what are you running? How to refer to the pointer? Oh, God. The trackpad on these is actually really nice. It feels very much like the glass trackpad from Mac. And it's very, very customizable in terms of, speed and everything else. So, no, it's the frame.work.
Yeah, and they've got the EC controller firmware in the framework laptop is based on Google's Chromium EC project, so it's open source EC firmware. Nice. I'm not sure what their BIOS firmware is, if that's open source, if it's core boot or not. They do have a BIOS thing, but it doesn't say. They do say they're supporting LVFS as a firmware update service for it, which is the service that I talked about, a Linux vendor firmware service. You can run FW update on your systems, and manufacturers register their firmware with LVFS, open source project, and that's how you can get firmware updates. So you can check your firmware levels, and you can even apply firmware if it's supported, if the vendor has registered that firmware with LVFS on your system. It's another thing I'm looking into as part of my day job.
Hey, so Alan and Adrian, does Fedora have like the long-term support thing? Multiple releases with
I haven't run
various long-term support.
Like I said, I think I tried Fedora like in the late 90s, early 2000s. I tried Fedora, and I haven't touched it since. I'm
going to give it a shot. I mean, honestly, I the last time I tried it was a couple of years ago. It was really nice, but I have so many business apps that I had to run that were Windows only at the time, but Linux has caught up, and like they run most of those same apps. So I'd love to be able to go back to Linux and just live there, because honestly, Windows is nice for gaming, and I'll always have a gaming system.
Sure. Yeah, my two gaming systems for my kids run Windows. All my computers run Linux, and I run Ubuntu. If
you want to work, you run Linux. It's just that simple.
Yep.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Mega says it can't decrypt your files, but a new proof of concept shows otherwise. So Meg is that cloud storage service from Kim.com. Remember Kim.com? You remember that
back in the day, right?
Right. He was back when we were called Paul. You know what I mean? People were like, "Oh, you mean you're like Kim.com?" German-Finnish internet entrepreneur, political advocate. He's from he lives in New Zealand. He was convicted on charges of computer fraud in 1994. Mega Upload was his thing, right? And he got in trouble for copyright infringement, money laundering, racketeering, and wire fraud. Wow. We should cover his story in depth. It's kind of interesting.
But we should interview him.
Right? He still had Mega, and it's like a competitor to Dropbox and shit. Yeah, Dropbox and Google Drive. And they say, as long as you ensure that your password is sufficiently strong and unique, no one will ever be able to access your data on Mega, even if the exceptionally improbable event Mega's entire infrastructure is seized. And now they found vulnerabilities in it. You can access the data, and there's no easy fix because of the way they implement the crypto.
And so they found, who was it? Damn it, who was the ones that found it? Research published on Tuesday. Basically, they're saying that there was, for some time, riddled with fundamental cryptography flaws, make it trivial to get in. Full key recovery attack. Full key recovery is they have your password, game over, man. And if that's the case, sorry, you're toast. And I used Mega a few years ago. I had to get a large file to somebody, and I was like, it was just the fastest way to do it, honestly. They would let you store a 10 gig file or something when everybody else was 2 gig free accounts, that kind of thing. And so I used them for some file or another, and it was cutesy, but it was unremarkable. But what they're saying is that it's trivial. Now they did a patch. They did, to their credit, they did a patch very quickly. It doesn't fix everything, but at least obfuscates or it negates the ability to start it from scratch. You have to figure out another way to get into the system, and then you could still do a full key recovery.
Right.
So that's not good for them.
No,
that's not good for them.
Some other fun things that I came across. Someone's telling me about the Microcorruption CTF. So if you go to microcorruption.com, there's an embedded security CTF. Speaking of embedded security, we talked about quite a bit on this episode. Scattered throughout the world in locked warehouses are briefcases filled with CY Yombinator bearer bonds that could be worth billions of dollars. You will help steal the briefcases. That's how the CTF starts. And so you've got to reverse engineer some firmware for Bluetooth kind of based locks, and to complete the CTF challenge. Oh, that was pretty cool.
Or watch the Lockpicking Lawyer episode on them and just use a shim and never mind. Anyway.
Yeah, that too. So I thought that was pretty cool. This one was really cool. Joel Grant told me about this one, and I had not heard of it yet. So are you familiar with the NSA ANT catalog?
Which catalog?
So it's the NSA ANT catalog or TAO catalog.
Oh, yeah, the TAO catalog. Yeah,
yeah. Classified product catalog by NSA, which version was written 2008, 2009, published in a German magazine.
Snowden,
yeah, the Snowden leaks released that. Now, there's a website called nsaplayset.org, which takes all of the so the NSA Playset was like all of these mostly hardware-based projects that allowed you to spy on people. So it was a catalog. Like the way I'm thinking of is you were in CIA and you were like, I need to spy on this person in like this hotel room. And like, I need a small electronic device to listen to audio that's going to fit inside of a lamp or whatever. Right. And so you go to the NSA catalog and be like, hey, well, like, what do you guys got for that? Oh, like you got all right. Like TAO, like I need one of those. I need to go, you need it to, cause I'm deploying to somewhere across the world. And you go to the catalog and you be able to do, then they give you the hardware and software and the tutorial on how to use it, right? That's just how I envision this happening. It maybe something similar happened, who knows? But the nsaplayset.org is how to do this in open source. So like how to take what they described in the Snowden leaks from the NSA playset in open source hardware, like how to do this on the cheap. Because all of the costs for all this stuff were listed in the documents. You can read it on Wikipedia. So nsaplayset.org is the open source kind of, hey, you can take this hardware and couple it with, get to do GSM. So like Twilight Vegetable was the code name for an easy to use boot and pwn toolkit for passive monitoring of GSM communications. So like they link to like DEF CON talks and like ingredients on how to like get an RTL SDR and like do it. So it's pretty cool. Oh, that was neat.
Some of this is BS, let's be honest. Some of this, I'm just going through it right now. Some of this is like, there's literally the underwear gnomes is in there a lot, actually. Step 1, pwn with this tool. Step 2, ? Step 3, profit.
Yeah, some of it's not quite filled out.
Some of them is not quite filled out. That was very well said.
Yes.
Some of them are not quite filled out.
But it's an interesting, like, little exercise, right? Like, I mean, you could kind of do this on your own. If you just read through the ANT catalog that was leaked and go like, oh, how do I do a backdoor exploit for Huawei firewalls, or an RF transceiver that makes it possible to extract data from systems, allow them to be controlled remotely. Like, oh, how would I do that with open source? That's
okay, this
cool.
is interesting. Drizzle Chair is a 2 terabyte hard drive with all the tools required to crack A51, and the rainbow tables, which is it's the GSM encryption system.
Right. Which
so that's
if you looked
pretty
hard
cool.
you looked hard enough, you could find that stuff. Wasn't that a TorCon? I want to say that's a TorCon or ShmooCon presentation.
Yeah. They've got a passive Wi-Fi reconnaissance drone with a Wi-Fi pineapple and UAV autopilot
you could
system.
cross-reference that with infocon.org. Is that Jeff's site?
I know the one you're speaking of.
Infocon.org is a hacking conference archive. There's also infocondb.org. So if you're playing along at home, remember infocon.org and infocondb.org are 2 sites that archive as many as they could find hacker conferences.
Is that the one that Jeff Moss built, or
so infocon.org is the one that Jeff Moss built. InfoconDB was someone else, and I can't remember the gentleman's name that did it. But he also built a site. InfoconDB I like because you can search for presenters.
Oh, that's
by name
cool.
In the database. So like when we go to interview someone or bring someone on the show, I'll often have their InfoconDB profile pulled up and I can see when they gave all the presentations. So it's kind of funny, like as I do Hacker Heroes, for example, and I'm interviewing someone, they're like, yeah, I gave a presentation on this DEF CON and I'm like, oh, it was DEF CON 17 in 2009. They're like, oh, yeah. It was. I'm like, this was the title. And this is who you presented with because it's
oh my God, they've got a few of mine.
Yep. And so some of us are in there. If you presented before at conferences. And Jeff's site is more of a preserving the internet, because I've actually talked to Jeff about this. Like, Jeff doesn't want anything that we've done in cybersecurity get lost, right? So he's built a website. I think I talked to him before he built this website. He's like, I really want to make sure like all the stuff we're saying, like, you guys do great, but like I want to make sure your podcasts are all archived. So there's actually a podcasts directory in here. We're archiving podcasts. There's a documentaries, which hacking documentaries. Oh, that's cool. The MP4 files for all these hacker documentaries are on his site, which is awesome. I've watched most of these on like Amazon and stuff. If you want to go off on a tangent and watch hacker documentaries, definitely do that.
It's fun. It's fun.
Because you know what the most fun part is though? Like, because I went on Amazon and I just searched for like hackers, and then watched all the documentaries. That's how I came up with Hacker Heroes, by the way. That was some of the inspiration for it. And really? Jeff has archived many of the ones that I watched. The great thing is, like, you'll see people that you know. Like, all of a sudden the documentary, they'll just do a quick cut, because you know they edit documentaries. Like, I watched so many, I edit them almost all the same. Like, there's a recipe for how to put together a documentary, right, that people learn in film school, and most of them follow this recipe, and it'll just be like a quick cut, and I'm like, there's someone I know. Like, I know that person. And then I'll be watching TV shows, and I'm like, oh, Josh Morpeth is now on a TV show in my bedroom. I'm like, that's creepy. And I'll tell you, message Josh.
I remember you called me. You were like, why are you on my TV?
You're on my TV, dude. This is insane.
And that was the time I was on American Book of Secrets or something like that.
Something like you were on a TV show.
Yeah, I've been on a few TV shows, and that time was American Book of Secrets on the History 2 channel or whatever.
Yes,
which is typically the Nazi and aliens channel.
Yes. I love documentaries, so yeah. Oh, what's cool is Code 2600, Jeremy Zarakak, panel discussion. So he's got the documentary, but then he's going to link to a panel discussion that maybe happened at DEF CON? It might have. That's really cool. No, Carnegie Mellon University. Scilab special event. That's really cool. Yeah, so some good stuff out there.
So
definitely, yeah. I mean, if you're nerding out in hacker and cybersecurity stuff, you definitely want to go through and watch these documentaries, because it's just... Some of them are really bad. Some of them are really good, and like everywhere in between. Like, it's really awesome. But yeah, that was some of the motivation to create the Hacker Hero show. Was that, like, I basically wanted to do my own kind of podcast documentary that featured all these hackers.
It's really weird. I've actually I'm looking at my list in Infocon DB going, I don't even remember. I do remember giving that talk.
Right. And do you remember the show that Joe Grand did?
Yeah, a prototype this or something like that.
Prototype this.
Yeah, I thought
I gotta go back and watch that. I never watched that. I gotta go back and watch it now.
Oh wow, they have my DEF CON 18 talk. That was one of my first talks, 2010.
It's awesome.
Wow.
And if it's on YouTube, he'll link to it. In Infocon DB, he'll link to it. Jeff's site is hosting the MP4 files.
He has the link. Yeah, he has the links into YouTube. Oh my God,
like
that is so cool.
Documented, like an interview with Larry Wall from 1999.
Yeah, but you have to do it in regex.
Right. That's really cool.
You know, we sort of. Oh wow. Oh my God. Discord went crazy. Adrian, the ridiculous bios. You're like, oh my God, I actually wrote that.
Be interesting to come up with your favorite hacker documentary. Like, you to watch all these, and what's our favorite hacker documentary? Oh,
wow, that's a good question. What's your favorite? What is your favorite?
I have to say, regardless of where you fall on Snowden, right? It's one of the most significant events in both cybersecurity and national security, right? Like, it's a significant event.
Yeah.
And
I agree. Agreed entirely.
Citizen 4 was what they called the documentary. But the documentary, I don't know if you've watched this particular one. There's the sensationalized movie, but there's the documentary. And in the documentary, it's actual footage of Snowden in the hotel room in Hong Kong talking to Andy Greenberg and Laura Petraeus. Laura Petraeus, did I get that right?
That's
it's
pretty
actual
cool,
footage. It's actual footage. Like, that to me, like, content, like, aside, I'm like, holy shit. Like, I'm front row seats into, like, what was happening in
history.
Arguably that's one of the most significant
history.
events in national security and in cybersecurity that we've experienced, is the Snowden links. And again, regardless of how you feel about that, having a front row seat to that and having the actual footage where he's, like, literally passing off doing his OPSEC, passing off the information and the things that were happening, I was like, that was pretty cool. That was pretty amazing.
Okay, I'll grant that one to you. I think that's probably one of the best.
Yeah.
I will say that most of the other documentaries out there, Dionysus is like being a witness directly to history. That's exactly where I was going with that.
Because it's actual footage, dude. Like, it's not actors and actresses. Like, it's the actual footage. Like, they were filming it as Snowden was passing off these, the information, which is just crazy.
Adrian just asked, is there a mega download for all these documentaries? I need a one-click download.
Yeah.
And that means I just need to smack you, Adrian. But anyway.
Write a crawler. It's called Beautiful Soup Library in Python.
But I mean, most of the documentaries that are out there are all about, like, where hackers are bad. And then they dramatize, people in ski masks with gloves, which suck to type in, let's be clear.
Right.
Or they have, they glamorize hackers as shadow runners, swooshing down a hallway in the tight Neo costumes. And the reality is that most of us are just people doing the best we can, the best way we know how.
Jeff has captured some of the like hacker documentaries out there. That's it's a fairly complete list.
We're being told unauthorized access by Annalisa Savage. We should watch that as well. Gauss is like, you need to watch this. So I will now have to look it up.
Yeah, it's cool stuff, man.
It's been a fascinating discussion tonight. You know that?
It's just me and you, man. Tyler had to drop. He's like, I had dinner reservation. He had to drop. No,
it's cool, but it's been interesting because we did focus.
You and I don't get a chance to like dig in and have this conversation on the show.
I love it.
It was awesome. It was just me and Josh just nerding out, right?
But we focused on the embedded world and the embedded threat, and I think it was really valuable. I enjoyed this. And it wasn't just me. Like, that's what was in the headlines this week. Really was that stuff. I wasn't focusing on anything else, and like I try and be as diverse as possible. And look, I go through Discord channels and I pull news, right? So it's news that other people are putting in Discord channels is my first stop, and then I have my feeds and what I called together. Oh, but we didn't talk about the last one here really quick. Senate bill would ban data brokers from selling location and health data. Regulation I can get behind, right? So a bill introduced by Elizabeth Warren would prohibit data brokers from selling Americans location and health data. Largely unregulated by federal law, data brokers gather intensely personal data such as location from seemingly innocuous sources, including weather apps and prayer apps, oftentimes without the consumer's consent or knowledge. I think this is a problem, and I think there should be a law that forbids this from happening. Forbidding data brokers from selling or transferring location and health data, and requires the FTC to promulgate rules to implement the law within 180 days. Defines data brokers as anyone that collects, buys, licenses, or infers data about individuals and then sells licenses or trades that data. Yeah, okay, here's the problem.
I'd even like it to be even more broad than just location or health data. I'd like it to be PII. Like, I want a law that prevents the DMVs in every state from reselling my data. Right now, on a federal level, there is no law that prevents that. Maybe state levels, but I haven't dug into the state laws, and they're all 50 states. But in any case,
valid, except that just as with GDPR, what you've got is the company that collects the data will then pass it off to a subsidiary, so they're not selling it. Okay, it's still within the same corporate structure, but that will meet the standard for that subsidiary to then be able to sell the data. Or alternatively, they won't sell it.
Yeah,
They'll
but
the
subsidiary should not be able to sell or lease that data. That's the point where you can put the block in. Dude,
the people doing this are, although I hate to say it, they're hackers too. They're going to game that system however they can. And if they can't game it, they'll lobby their way out of it. Because let me be blunt. I bought a TV at Costco the other day. I got a great TV for a great price. I'm ecstatic about it. Okay? I got an LG 65-inch TV for $550.
Nice.
You're telling me that LG was able to manufacture that TV, ship it halfway around the world, put it in a special box with more styrofoam than I know what to do with. Like, I'm going to build a castle for my kid out of this stuff.
Right.
Okay?
Because you can't recycle it and you have to throw it away, and then it doesn't fit in the garbage bags. Yeah, I handle the struggle.
Oh, it's a nightmare. But, and sell it to me for $550 and make a profit on it? No.
They have to sell your data. It's just like the Dunkin' Donuts app. My wife's ecstatic. Oh, I have the Dunkin' Donuts app and I get free coffee. I'm like, your coffee's not free. She's like, no, like it's free. Like they scan my app and I get a free coffee. I'm like, you know, it's not really free. That they're like, because what information did you put in that app and what permissions did you give it, and whatever they're collecting and whatever you gave them, they're selling, and that's how they're making money to pay for that air quotes free coffee that you just got. She's like, no, but I get free coffee. Like, did you get that? All right.
All she cares about is she's getting free coffee. And this goes back to our embedded security discussion. All they care about is that their fish tank thermometer works.
Right. But I still think with data, there has to be a way to regulate to prevent our data from being willy-nilly sold. It's not going to be 100%. I get it. The hackers be hacking.
Too many companies make too much money
on data. Right, that's how things. But you're right, Josh. That's how things are free or lower cost, because they're monetizing my data.
Well, okay, and as well, so there's a couple of things that are rising, and one is all of those services that are gig economy services, and they're rising because the VC subsidy is falling away, and the freebies that you're getting because your data is being sold, they're starting to go away, because while they're still selling your data, they're like, we can raise the prices, and they'll still pay them. Okay, you know, like it's.
But these laws to me make more sense than banning straws or plastic bags.
They may. We shall see. We shall see, my friend. We shall see.
I really don't think there's data or science to back up the straw and the plastic bag thing. Again,
yeah,
I'm
like
a
seeing
hacker.
A turtle with a straw stuffed up his nose. Come on, that's just ugly. I don't mind the straws. I carry straws now. I have stainless steel.
I know, but like
silicone straws.
Percentage of the animals that like suffer because of straws is insignificant.
Dude, carry a frigging. Do you want a straw? I'll send you some straws. I'll Amazon you some stainless steel straws. They're really nice.
But that's not the point. I want to see the data that they're basing these laws on for straws and plastic bags. Like I don't think it impacts. So I listened to a whole podcast from Jordan Harbinger. You guys can go listen to it. He does like a Debunking Myth Sunday episode every week. And so they talked about Reiki and crystals in one episode. They talked about ear candling, the ear wax, where you put the candle in your ear and it's supposed to pull the wax out, and how that's a complete hoax. And they back it up with facts and the whole thing. They did one on recycling. And after listening to that episode, I challenge anyone that lives in a state or passing laws, or if you're thinking about these laws, the actual impact on the environment. Once you know how recycling works and the impact of these plastics on the environment. I don't think
the plastic in the ocean. I don't want the plastic in the dump. I don't want the plastic. I mean, they're finding ways.
But I still think if you look at the science, though, the impact to the oceans based on straws or plastic bags is not that significant at all.
No, like it's extremely significant. Have you heard about the gyres of the Pacific?
No.
Or is it the Atlantic or the Pacific? So the Great Atlantic Garbage Patch is literally a dead zone in the middle of the ocean that is hundreds of miles wide, thousands of miles wide. I don't even know. That is basically just the plastics have killed everything in that patch. They're finding microplastics in human fetuses. When babies are being born, they already have microplastics in them. It's not so much the other animals. I'm a Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Thank you. And that's in Discord. And
right, I'm not disputing that. We're way off.
No, and I know you're not. I know you're not. I'm not saying you're heartless. I'm not saying it at all.
No. I'm saying there are things we can do to help the environment. I don't believe, and feel free to prove me wrong, but what I've seen so far, I don't believe that straws and plastic bags, in their impact and regulations, are having an impact on that. I do think plastics are a problem, but I don't. Single-use
plastics.
I think we have the problem, but we don't have the right solution, right?
Okay, I'm valid with that.
Right.
And somebody said if
how
make recycling,
you have to go listen to that episode on how recycling works, because they also talk about, okay, if you don't have plastic bags, okay, paper bags are one thing, but the reusable bags are not recyclable at all. Some of the reusable bags mix cloth and different type of plastics, making them not recyclable, and they go into the landfill and cause more problems than you would have in plastic bags. Right? So I'm not saying it's 100% in all cases, but like those are the things that I don't think people are thinking about, like the actual things that, like this relates to cybersecurity, because we talk about this show all the time, like shit that actually matters versus shit that doesn't actually matter as it applies to cybersecurity. And the same shit's happening in recycling. Like I want to see recycling have an impact. And what we think we're doing by throwing stuff in the recycle bin may not be helping the planet at all. In fact, it may be more work. It may be more environmentally destructive than just throwing it in the trash. In some cases, right? It depends on what you're recycling in and how. So there's a lot more at work than just going, we're going to ban straws because it's good for the environment. I don't really think that's the case. I think there's other better and again, as I talked about in the previous segment, right? Like I minored in environmental science. I'm very conscious of I've been an outdoorsman my entire life. I've been fishing for over 40 years of my life. Like very conscious of the environment. I just don't think we have the right solutions, Josh. I think cybersecurity suffers from the same thing. We need firewalls or like whatever it is, right? But that's not really the solution to the problem that we're after.
Okay, so here's the deal. I agree with you. All right, to be very blunt, I agree with you. My personal belief is that we need better ways to recycle. We need better methods of recycling.
Agreed.
We need better ways to not force, but to incentivize people to recycle in ways that are meaningful.
Right.
Like
some of the ways don't make sense. Like, yeah, like if I've got the reusable shopping bag, I want it to be something, if that's got 3 months of use out of it before it gets gross, I want to be able to take that and throw that in my compost bin and have it compost down, right? Because otherwise you're throwing it away and you're making the problem worse. Now you've just thrown something away, and some of these bags are made to not be recyclable at all. Now you've just contributed more to the problem trying to solve the problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we're in a lot of situations like that.
Why doesn't Starbucks charge more to let you use a disposable cup? Okay.
Right.
And charge you less if you use a reusable cup.
Sure. I totally use a reusable cup at Starbucks. Right. Totally.
I mean, I don't drink Starbucks because they over roast their beans and it's garbage. But
I do like their Americanos, I will admit.
Okay, valid. But I mean, the point is that if they charged $1 extra to use one of their monster paper cups, more people would bring recyclables.
Right.
Okay.
And more people would pay more money at Starbucks too. Do you know how much profit Starbucks made? I heard this on a podcast. I haven't fully fact checked it, but what I heard, Starbucks turned an $8 billion profit. Is that true? I don't know. Fact check me on that. Because that number seems really staggering.
Okay, so I'm being told they do charge more for disposable cups. Shows how long it's been since I've been to Starbucks. I was not aware of that.
They turn like an enormous profit. I'm talking revenue. Profit.
Oh, no doubt.
Profit, dude. Like $8 billion. And just think about that from you're a business owner. They turned $8 billion in profit. This was the debunking episode on tipping and how tipping is like a big scam.
Well, tipping at a Starbucks.
But tipping like for food service workers is a disservice to workers and a benefit for the business is what they were establishing in that episode. And I thought that was fabulous episode.
I used to work in restaurants, and tipping was at once the best and the worst thing ever.
Yep.
If I'd gotten a stable wage, it would have been
you got to listen to their episode on tipping. They talk about all the different aspects of tipping, and you're like, holy shit, like that's a broken ass system that it's just part of our society and culture. Like tipping is like a thing.
Yep. I tip and they have tipping at counter service places, and I'm like, I have to tip?
Right.
Like they have tipping at fast food places sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Or fast casual rather. And I'm like, wait, what? But I tip because I'm afraid that I don't want to look like an asshole. Like seriously, I don't want to look like an asshole.
At Starbucks, though, you don't tip because you think with $8 billion of profit, like, man, pay your workers more money. Like that's, and I think they did. They did raise the rates for Starbucks employees because they weren't turning so much profit.
Is it Walmart that they proved that, the taxpayer actually subsidizes the Walmart wages because most of the workers are on food stamps?
Mm-hmm.
So, look, we've
but all these it relates back because we talk about these things, and the reason these topics I listen to the Jordan Harbinger show, I listen to some non-cybersecurity podcasts, but they get me thinking about cybersecurity in that context of how we've come up with a solution that's not solving the problem, right? It's largely tipping was a solution, but the problem wasn't the workers making money. The problem was reducing overhead for companies, right? The problems with recycling is a solution that makes people feel good, but doesn't necessarily address the problems. And those are the things we as cybersecurity professionals, I think, are really tuned into because it happens in our industry more often than not. We have the solution in this firewall, this whatever, WAF makes me feel good, but it's not really a measure to solve the problem.
It's a problem, man. We go for what will fix it for right now. Right. We go for what will get the code out right now. We go for what will get the code out most cheaply. We get for what will get the code out the door so I don't have to think about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is future you is going to hate current you.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't care anymore.
We dig a lot of technical debt.
Oof. Way technical debt.
Josh, it's been great. Just you and I on the show hammering it out, man.
I love it, man. Can we do this more often?
We can absolutely do it more often. That will conclude this episode of Paul Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Over and out.